poppin', everybody? It's your boy Armon, and we are back with another video. All right, if you're a returning subscriber, then you know how this thing goes. And if you're a new subscriber, well, welcome and hello. All right, so let's just get right into it. The Joe Budden podcast, as we know it, is at an end. Well, at least with the original members. All right, I'm gonna be honest with you though. I watched that full 3-hour podcast over on Patreon that Joe Budden just put up, and he's the first person that ever got me to pay for some content. Like, I don't pay subscriptions, but he got my money. Honestly, I even tried to be cheap and do the $5, and they were like, no, sir, you got to get up and you got to do the full 10. Okay. So I had to do the full 10. And so they got $10 out of me today. And let me tell you something. It was worth the $10. Okay. I sat there and I listened to the whole 3-hour show. And I'm gonna be honest with you. This podcast, the Joe Budden podcast, should have probably ended a long time ago because a lot of things were not done right on both ends, you know, and I could understand both sides of the coin. And I understand how both parties, meaning Rory and Ma, and then Joe, feel some kind of way. So let's take it from the beginning. Joe Budden has the podcast. He starts a podcast before there's a Rory or a Ma. He starts it by himself. So he's the owner of the podcast. Ma comes along, Rory comes along, then Ma comes along. Then they build this podcast together, right? And then, you know, things start taking off. They sign contracts. They understand that there's no ownership there. And they sign these contracts. This is where they went wrong. This is where it went wrong, in my opinion. Now, Joe, he knew what he was doing. Hey, I want a podcast. You guys will be great for the podcast. Whatever. Here's the contracts. Whatever. No one's making any money right now. This is what we're doing. Boom. Podcast. But Joe is industry. You see, Joe's industry, he understands the business. He's been burnt before in the music business. So he understands the ropes, but he also understands that this is his podcast. And he knew from the beginning that he was never giving up any ownership of the podcast. He knew this from day one. He knew from the beginning that he would never be giving up any stock in his podcast. He knew that. He knew that. There's no one that can tell me that he had an idea to think there maybe he would have split. He knew he wasn't going to split from the beginning. Now, who did not know that, or who probably wasn't even thinking about that, is Rory and Ma. They're probably thinking, okay, boom, we're doing a podcast with Joe Budden. This is our guy. We're all friends. This is going to be good for the culture. This is dope. Boom, we're doing a podcast. Sure, we'll sign a contract. We're not really making a lot of money right now. Joe sweet talks them and tell them, hey, you guys are going to make X amount of money. This thing, you know, whatever sponsors we get, boom, we'll put it on my YouTube channel. It's great. They probably feel like, well, Joe, you have the platform. So, you know, it does make sense for it to go on your YouTube channel. You're the bigger star. You'll bring the draw. You're the controversial one. So it really doesn't matter. We don't even mind you getting the most money. So then a podcast is born with the three of them, okay? And it's called, I'll name this podcast Later, which is great. Then all of a sudden it starts to grow. And then boom, here it turns into the Joe Budden podcast. Boom, that's the thought there. Why is it the Joe Budden podcast? Okay, so then that should have been another red flag for Rory and Ma, like, okay, this is the Joe Budden podcast. To me, in my mind, I always thought it was the Joe Budden podcast because just in case he needed to replace them, he didn't have to do any more. He didn't have to change any flyers, any branding, because, you know, it was always about him. And they were just the two guys that they could come or go. You know, if you would have had it, you know, did a bunch of branding with their pictures and faces and names on it, if somebody leaves, you have to pay for all that media to be done all over. So I thought from Joe's standpoint, he was being smart because he's like, well, this is mine. And if they ever leave, I don't have to change any of the marketing and branding material because, you know, it says the Joe Budden podcast. However, they seemingly went with that. Now, Joe says in his Patreon, okay, boom. No marketing and advertisers, they did not want to do billboards with Ma and Rory and things like that. They just wanted Joe Budden because it's yours and you're the podcast. So whatever, they took it. They had these conversations, I'm assuming privately, and they were okay with it to a certain degree, and they kept rocking. Now, boom, this podcast is getting bigger. It's growing. It's growing. It's growing. It's growing. It's growing. And now it's the #1 podcast on Apple. They got Spotify deals. I mean, it's huge. It's a big influential mark in the culture, right? And now you got Rory and Ma, but more so Rory, wanting a little bit more stock, wanting a little bit more ownership, wanting to see where the money is going. And rightfully so. Rightfully so. Of course he would, want to do that. I can see that, especially when you have, DJ Akademiks coming at you saying basically you guys are Joe's little bitchs. You all work for Joe. You have nothing. And then you got Joe, going back and forth with Charlemagne and different other media personalities talking about how he's an owner of such things and how these other people are not owning anything. So, they're going to be starting to look at them. They're going to look at themselves like, okay, well, sure. If ownership is what it's about, Joe, you're preaching ownership. Well, at some point, they're going to want some type of ownership too. And I feel like Joe should have expected that and should have known that. But and I feel like he probably did. But in his mind, from the very beginning, he was never giving up any ownership to his baby, his podcast. That was never going to happen. So it probably never crossed his mind. So Rory is kind of at a point now, after you're 7 years in, you're starting to feel like, well, boom, I want a little ownership. I need something to call my own. I want a little stock in this because I'm coming to work all the time. I don't have any stock in this. You know what I mean? All I have is this contract. I want to see what the books is hitting for. I want to see, why did we pass up the Spotify deal? Why are we, can I get some money off of YouTube? Like, why does this person get paid this amount of dollars and why does this person not get paid this, or whatever the case may be? He's becoming more inquisitive because, the star is getting bigger. The deals are getting bigger. The people are talking. The money's getting bigger. And it's seeming like everything is about Joe, but they're feeling like, well, we've helped create this to this point. So as any regular person, I understand where Rory and Ma kind of feel some type of way. I honestly do. However, I feel like Rory and Ma should have seen the signs very, very close on. I mean, there's no way you can talk about other artists like Megan Thee Stallion and these different artists, and talk about how they didn't go over their contracts or how they weren't smart with dealing with their labels and contracts. And here you guys are not really knowing how to negotiate your contracts and feeling some type of way because you guys don't know anything that's going on with the money. And you guys are sitting on a show with a man that's literally controlling everything. And you literally know nothing. So you can't talk about somebody going over contracts and this, that, and the third when you guys did not do your own business the right way. Or at least in a way for it to make sense to you. They did not do it right. This is their fault. This is honestly their fault. Now, on Joe's side, was it a bit of a sleazy move? Because I feel like he knew that he was never giving up any ownership? Yes and no. Because I'm going to be honest with you. I felt like I was coming into this to feel like Joe Budden was trash. I was ready to annihilate Joe. I was ready to say, Joe Budden is trash. He's a narcissist. He's self-absorbed, arrogant, self-destructive, all of these nasty things that people say about him. But at the same time, I had to take Joe out of it and put myself in his position as a creator. Am I going to build the Armon Wiggins show? Am I going to build my Boys Chat podcast? Am I going to build the Armon Wiggins show podcast? Bring some people on to the podcast that are not here. Obviously, I'm here by myself now. Then I bring some guys in, give them an opportunity. Then all of a sudden it blows up and I give them stake into my company, or I got to sell them part ownership over this brand that I've completely built. Absolutely not. But I'm making very clear to them in the beginning, you're not getting any ownership of this. And I think that's where the mark was missed. But they should have discussed that. You're not getting any ownership of this. This is mine. And I don't need to give you, you don't need to see the books. If you agree to a certain pay rate, this is what you're getting paid. You don't need to worry about what else is going on because you've agreed to this certain amount of money. Now, if they're friends like they say they are, Joe, I feel like, and if it's really no tea, because they feel like Joe is kind of being sneaky and, scheming behind the scenes with the money. Joe's saying that they're overpaid. He pays them way more than they're worth. I feel like if that's the case, if it's that simple and you're not going to give them any more money, just show it to them. Show it to them. I feel like I would just show you, because if I know if I'm not going to pay you, if I know that I'm not going to pay you either way, I don't have anything to hide. I'm just going to show you this is what it is. Look, and if they're truly getting overpaid, show me where they're getting overpaid, and then you fire them for questioning you. But I feel like when Joe is acting like, oh, you want to see the book, you don't get to see what I make. You don't get that. What are you hiding? So I think that is a little weird, because it's like, okay, bro, you're hiding. And I get it. You don't feel like your friends should question you. But at the same time, listen, if y'all making money like this and they have a question and it's not a problem, just show it to them. Like, I mean, you guys, these are grown men. I mean, you guys have been working together for 7 years. You can show them at least what the podcast is bringing in. At least show them what the numbers are being negotiated. Like, I just feel like that's a bit weird. Why don't they know what the Spotify negotiations look like? Why don't they know the details of it? I mean, I get that it's your podcast, but they could have been in on it somehow. Like, I don't like, to me that is a bit weird that he didn't feel like he should have explained any of that to them, or at least given them the option to see what it was. I mean, I don't feel like they were asking to see his bank account. Perhaps they just want to see, the revenue that the podcast brings in, so they can understand. And I think that's a fair thing to do. So then he talked about, Joe Budden actually talks about, he said, but when they start asking about, wanting to audit and see what's basically going on the podcast, see what the money is bringing, he's forced to look at what they bring to the table. And so again, that brings me back to my point about putting myself in his position. Listen, you want to know what I'm bringing in. You want to know what it's hitting for. You want to know the ins and outs. You want ownership. So now I have to look at your work ethic. Are you here on time? Do you spend any money on this podcast out of your own money? Do you give any of your own money? Do you have refreshing ideas? Do you find guests? Do you leverage deals? Have you brought a deal back to me? You know what I mean? What have you contributed outside of coming in every day, taking a seat and speaking to the microphone? What have you contributed to grow the business in front of the camera and behind the scenes? Because a lot of times I can probably rest assure you that Joe Budden is doing majority of the work trying to bring in sponsors, networks, having negotiations. And he alluded to the fact that they're not doing those things. He even kind of alluded to the fact that they're late. They don't know what's going on. So when you start having questions about money and then you wanting stock in the company, it's kind of like, well, why? When I don't even feel like you're doing anything. So I get it, because for me, I'm not going to, bring somebody in over here and then all of a sudden, because we're getting some views and they're sitting down next to me, they feel like they need to see the books. They need ownership. I don't care what you the audience say. If I'm the one booking guests, if I'm the one finding topics, if I'm the one got to deal with the legal stuff behind the scenes, if I'm the one that's got to, pay for studio time, pay for engineering, pay for the overhead, do all of this, your pay is your pay. But this is my baby. You don't get to come in. I have all this responsibility in front of the camera and be off camera. And then you just get to come and show up because you know I'm going to take care of everything because this is initially my baby. And then, okay, let me give you half of the company and see if you're going to put in equal amount of work. No, you need to show me what you can bring to the company for me to be like, oh, okay, maybe we can go into business and I can give you a little bit more. Maybe I can give you some stock, but I'm not just giving you stock of my company because you're here. No, it doesn't work like that because we got views together. Absolutely not. Joe also talked about how Rory wanted some of the YouTube money. That's catchy. I mean, that's a little shifty because I get it. If I'm Joe Budden, I'm not giving you my YouTube money because I got more than the Joe Budden podcast on here. I have old music videos, old interviews that people go back and watch that I'm monetizing off of. YouTube does not break that money up. And it's probably very, very tedious to go through each to see, okay, well, at the end of the month, okay, what did I make the most money on? How much did this episode make? How much did this? You know what I mean? You just get your check and your check is just your check for the month. But at the same time, for Rory, I'm like, I get it. You probably like, damn, are we missing out on some money? But that's why you just make sure whatever number you negotiated with and you signed for, you are comfortable with that. And then if you weren't, you wait till the contract is over and you renegotiate the contract. And if at that point they're not trying to give you what you want, then you leave. And then when you do that, you better make sure that you have provided and shown the value in you so that your needs can be met. And I'm kind of feeling like Joe doesn't really see the full value in Rory. Rory, for sure. Not to mention, he also said, which I thought was interesting, he also said that he's told them, Mal, for sure, start a YouTube channel. Start your own channel. Grow your own channel. Leverage that. They've never done it. Let me tell you something. As a creator, I've been there. I've had friends that I've said, do this. Do this with your YouTube. Start your YouTube channel. They don't listen. Then, you know, we work together or whatever the case may be. You know, they may want a certain amount of money. They feel like they want to get paid this. They want to get paid that. You don't get paid what I get paid on my channel. You don't get to come on my channel that I built, and then because you sit next to me for a couple of episodes thinking that we're going to split this 50-50. It doesn't work that way. I built this. Now I can give you a little bit of something over here, but you're not going to get what I get. You're not my equal, not over here. Now you can build your own channel, and 9 times out of 10, they don't do the work on their own channel. A lot of times people will come over to your built platform when you have the influence and they see you making money and they feel like, okay, well, if you're making money and now I'm contributing a little platform, now I should be making what you're making. No, I was making this money and making moves on my platform before you got here. So just because you're here now does not mean all of a sudden there's a 50-50 split. No, girl, I'm going to give you what I can give you that we negotiate, but you don't make what I make. Now, you want to start making what I make? Well, go do it on your platform and make whatever you make plus more, whatever you want to do. You know what I mean? So I get it. And a lot of times, like Joe Budden said, they didn't do anything. They didn't create their space. That's their problem. There's no way in God's green hell I would go on anybody's platform and not have a secondary platform or that's like me. If I had an opportunity to be on the Joe Budden network or work with Joe Budden or in any capacity, I'm not getting rid of my YouTube channel at all. I'm not getting rid. Now I might get an exclusive, say I get an exclusive contract with Apple or Spotify, Tidal, whatever. Fine. But I'm still dropping content over here because I own this. I run this whole thing. I'm getting all that money. So, you know, I just feel like they weren't smart in it. And I feel like the podcast honestly should have been over a long time ago. Because secretly, I feel like Joe knew that he was never going to give any stock up. I don't feel like they did the business right. And I think once they started to see that it was growing, they probably should have tried to renegotiate, or I don't know how long these contracts were, but I'm just talking like they should have tried to renegotiate that, or they should have waited till the contract was done and then renegotiated again. But I think a lot of times when friends get into starting new ventures together, they're so hyped and excited because it's new. A lot of times people don't think to the future as to what it can become. So they don't have those difficult conversations about money, power, and ownership. And I think that a lot of this could have been alleviated had they had those conversations earlier on. They should have had conversations on what it looks like if they became the #1 podcast. What does that look like if they start getting millions and millions of views? Because inevitably that's what happened. What does that look like for the YouTube? What does that look like if they get an audio or video production deal? They should have had these conversations. I don't feel like they were even thinking on that level, which they should have. Now, Joe probably has. I feel like Joe did. Joe had a vision. And in that vision, it did not include sharing any of his business, which I understand because I'm not giving nobody none of my business. So I'm not entirely mad at Joe. I can't even sit up here and act like I would be giving them 50% or any stock in my business. Now, would I have probably shown them the books, especially if everything was right and I had nothing to hide? Yeah. Now, would I have told them, stop playing with me? I don't have to hide anything from you. Yeah. Would I have fired them? Maybe, because it just would have been weird. I don't know if I would even have fired them. I would have just showed them and told them, now what? This is what it is. But I feel like Joe, I do feel like there's something to me, a person, you can't help but to feel like there's something sneaky going on. Because what is the secret? Why are you hiding it? You shouldn't be hiding it if everything is cool. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on it. The Joe Budden podcast is over. It needs to be, because the relationship is not going to be the same. Money, fame changes people. Joe was able to keep it consistent because he knew from the beginning that he was never giving up his podcast. That was Rory and Maul's bad. This is why, I'll be honest with you, you don't see a lot of people sitting up here with me, because I'm not giving this up. This is my seat, and I didn't work. That's like me working very hard, and all of a sudden I have a co-host, and then they feel like, all of a sudden they should be getting, they own half of this, the Armon Wiggins show or the Boys Chat, or they should be paid. Or that's like me having the Boys Chat podcast and they feeling like, they should be paid some X amounts of dollars. You're wrong. Not when I paying for the streaming software, not when I have to book the interviews, not when I have to stay up and create X, Y, Z, not when I have to make sure everything sounds good, not when I'm paying monthly subscriptions to be hosted on this platform and that platform. Just because you show up, you are not entitled to ownership in extra amounts of money, because there's a lot more that goes into it than just showing up. So that's why I lean more towards Joe Budden, because there's a lot more to this. And I see a lot of the fans that are not creators, they're just watchers. They're like, well, Joe Budden is trash. Joe Budden is a narcissist. Joe Budden is self-destructive. Joe Budden is this. Joe Budden is that. To a certain degree, I can get it. I see what you're saying, but at the same time, you have to hold Rory and Maul accountable, and you have to also understand all they do is show up. So they don't get the same benefits, perk, pay, and recognition as Joe Budden, because he has to show up, perform, and handle all the stuff behind the scenes. He said something that was so interesting to me, and I agreed with it. He was like, you go get a deal, bring it back to me, and I'll take less. Not much less, but I'll do it. And that's real. You go get a deal, bring it back to me, and I'll take less. Most times that doesn't happen. Most times people are always waiting for the person whose name is on it, whose show it is to go get all the deals, they come and they show up and they feel like they should be equally paid. No, not gonna happen. So I'm with Joe, but at the same time, I feel like because this conversation hadn't happened sooner, the podcast should have probably not even gotten this far. You know what I mean? So those are my thoughts on it. You guys let me know what you think about the situation, and make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. Oh, and most importantly, please follow me on all your podcasting networks, social sites, at the Armon Wiggins Show. All right. So I'm all over Spotify. I'm on iTunes. You know, I'm on all platforms. The Armon Wiggins Show right here. See that right there? I'm everywhere. So just type me in and give me a subscription, give me a like and comment, and, you know, and support my podcast over there. All right. So thank you guys for watching. Until next time, I want you to keep that same energy, and I'll see you niggas soon. Peace out.